Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Core studio. Welcome to the show. So, spoiler season continues on today, and what a day it has been, and it's not even lunchtime yet. Or at least it's not yet lunchtime for me. I have no idea what time it is for you or when you eat lunch, but I have not eaten lunch yet, so I'll be doing that after this episode, hopefully. But my lunch schedule aside, if you haven't seen this morning's earliest episode on Cody, make sure you check that one out because it is the weirdest 5-color commander. And it's not just weird because it's a talking book, it is an incredibly unique card. But as for this episode, it's going to be on another one of the Elder Dragons with Galazeth Prismari. And the question that I'm asking for this commander is this another Urza? To see what I'm talking about, let's jump into things. First off, a huge thank you to MTG Goldfish for this translated version. So, Galazeth Prismari is a 3/4 Elder Dragon with flying that costs 2 blue-red. When it enters the battlefield, you create a treasure token, and artifacts you control have tap at a mana of any color, spend this mana only to cast an instant or sorcery spell. So, this commander is quite similar to Urza, but not quite there. Thankfully. Like Urza, it makes you an artifact when it comes into play. In the case of Urza, it makes you a construct that can get bigger. In the case of Galazeth, it makes you a treasure that you can use for mana. But instead of tapping and sacrificing it, you can also utilize it to cast instants and sorceries over and over again. Now again, the main difference between this and Urza is that you are restricted on what you can cast with that mana that you're generating from your artifacts. But that doesn't mean that you can't do incredibly powerful things with it. Again, this essentially turns any spell that makes an artifact token into a ramp spell. But one small difference, and one that you should keep in mind, is that the wording is different. Urza says tap an untapped artifact you control, add blue. Galazeth says artifacts you control have tap. It might not seem like that big of a difference, but essentially if you've got an artifact creature and it doesn't have haste, you can't just tap it for mana right away. With Urza you'd be able to, but with Galazeth you cannot. Still, for artifact tokens like treasures, you can tap those right away to help you cast instants and sorceries. And there are plenty of powerful things that you can do with this commander, and things can get out of control really quickly. First off, there are plenty of ways to make treasures in Izzet, like Pirate's Pillage, Spell Swindle, and Brass's Bounty. And again, because these are instants and sorceries, your artifacts can help cast them. Pirate's Pillage is going to make you discard 1 card to draw 2 and make 2 treasure. Again, this is basically an incredible ramp and draw spell in this deck. You're essentially getting 2 mana back right away. And then Spell Swindle says counter target spell, and you're going to make X treasures, where X is that spell's converted mana cost. So if your opponent tries to cast something big, you can surprise out of nowhere, counter it, and get a lot of treasures to help you generate even more mana. And speaking of generating absurd amounts of mana, there's Brass's Bounty. For each land you control, you get a treasure. So you're essentially doubling up the effectiveness of your lands. Though again, yes, keep in mind that you can only utilize those treasures to cast instants and sorceries, but you're going to have plenty of those in this deck. Or I guess I should specify that yes, you can still utilize them as regular treasures. So if you're in a situation where it's worth tapping and sacrificing them to cast a non-instant or sorcery, you can. But an incredible card for this deck that is coming out in this set as well is Stormkiln Artist. It gets +1/+0 for each artifact you control, but the important part is, Magecraft, whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, create a treasure token. So now every single one of your instant sorcery spells are going to generate you even more mana. And speaking of ramping and generating a lot of mana, there's Storm the Vault. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you get a treasure. And then at the beginning of your end step, if you control 5 or more artifacts, transform Storm the Vault. It transforms into Vault of Catlacan, which can tap to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, or you're more likely going to tap it to add blue to your mana pool for each artifact you control. Again, this deck is going to be working to get an absurd amount of artifacts in play, so this can tap for a ton. But of course, outside of treasures, there are plenty of other artifact tokens that can really help us out. So when starting off with our other tokens, let's talk about food tokens, which yes, somehow exist in Izzet colors. So you can use a card like Turn Into a Pumpkin, which can bounce a non-land permanent back to its owner's hand, draw you a card, and make you a food token. And then of course there's everyone's favorite cat oven card from Standard, which is Oven. It has tap, sacrifice a creature, create a food token. If the sacrificed creature's toughness was 4 or greater, create 2 food tokens instead. So if one of your creatures is going to die anyways, you might as well sacrifice them for some value. We also have clue tokens though with the investigate mechanic with things like Confirmed Suspicions, Tamio's Journal, and Trail of Evidence. Confirmed Suspicion says counter target spell, investigate 3 times. So usually this is going to be a somewhat lesser spell swindle for this deck, but it can still be incredibly effective. And then Tamio's Journal says at the beginning of your upkeep, investigate, and tap, sacrifice 3 clues, search your library for a card and put that card in your hand, then shuffle your library. So this can be consistent mana generation for us on top of a tutor. But the best of these for this deck has got to be Trail of Evidence, which says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, investigate. So much like Storm-Killed Artist, now every single one of our instant sorcery spells ramps us. But a fantastic card to get down early, especially in this deck, is Curse of Opulence. It's an aura curse that says enchant player. Whenever enchanted player is attacked, create a colorless artifact token named Gold. It has sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Each opponent attacking that player does the same. So this puts a target on one of our opponent's backs, and it generates us a lot of mana throughout the game. And Gold is actually even better than Treasure. With our treasure tokens, if we tap them for mana, we can't also just tap and sacrifice them too. But with Gold, we can tap it for mana, and then if we need extra mana, we can also sacrifice them to essentially generate 2 mana from 1 gold in a turn. Still, regardless, both are good in this deck. And of course, we can also include some artifact creature token generation with things like Loyal Apprentice and Saheeli Sublime Artificer. Loyal Apprentice has Lieutenant. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control your commander, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. The token gains haste until end of turn. So these artifact creature tokens we can actually utilize right away for mana. And then Saheeli has, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create a 1/1 servo. Again, we can't utilize them for mana right away, but we're going to make a lot of mana with this over time. Now let's talk about some other types of cards to consider with this deck, and let's start with Dramatic Reversal. It says untap all non-land permanents you control. So yeah, untapping all of our non-land permanents, including all of our artifacts, is going to be a really big thing for this deck. This is essentially a giant ritual effect that lets us cast an absurd amount of instants and sorceries in one turn. And then blink effects like Essence Flux can be very effective as well. It says exile target creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. So we can use this to protect our commander, and when we do so, we get another treasure because of that ETB. And saving our commander and getting to ramp on top of that is huge. We can also utilize some spell doubling effects with things like bonus round. It says until end of turn, whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell, that player copies it and may choose new targets for the copy. Yeah, this can get pretty out of hand in a deck like this. When it comes to finishing opponents off, we can do so with giant X spells with things like Explosion. It's going to deal X damage to any target, and target player draws X cards. Or we can further utilize our artifacts with things like Gearport Aether Grid. It says tap 2 untapped artifacts you control. Gearport Aether Grid deals 1 damage to our creature or player. And a big thanks to Eddie for pointing this one out. It can be a fantastic way to ping our opponents down or finish them off or take out some of their creatures if we need to. Now when it comes to the Prismari Dragon fitting in the 99 of another commander deck, the first one that came to my mind was Brutaclad. It gives your creature tokens haste, makes creature tokens. It can also change all of your tokens into whatever you want. Or I guess I should say, whatever you want out of the tokens that you have. Another one that might want to consider this is Saheeli the Gifted. Saheeli can make you servo, she can save you mana on spells, and she can also double up your artifacts. So you can have some really big explosive turns with Saheeli. And one more commander that might want to consider this is Breya. Breya loves artifacts and generally has a good amount of instants and sorceries in the deck that can be very powerful. But now let's talk about some pricey considerations that you might want to consider if you've got the budget for them, and let's start off with Unwinding Clock. It says untap all artifacts you control during each of their player's untap step. So essentially this untaps all those artifacts so we can utilize them for instants on our opponent's turns. And you can't talk about treasure creation without mentioning Dockside Extortionist. When it comes into play, you create X treasure tokens where X is the number of artifacts and enchantments your opponents control. So yeah, in a game of Commander, this can be a lot. And of course, there's everyone's favorite Hull Breacher. It has flash and it says if an opponent would draw a card except the first one they draw on each of their draw steps, instead you create a treasure token. So if someone tries to draw a good amount of cards, you say, no cards for you, just treasure for me. And the last one is the very expensive and very powerful commander that I mentioned earlier, Urza Lord High Artificer. Urza does a lot of things, but most notably, it lets you tap an untapped artifact you control to add blue. So now, essentially, your artifacts can tap for any color if they're helping you cast an instant or sorcery, or if you're just casting anything else, you can just tap them for blue. So yeah, if you've got the budget for it, it's incredibly powerful in a deck like this. But now it's time for me to wrap things up and give you my final thoughts on Galazeth Prismari. I really like the design of this commander. It's powerful, yet it does have a restriction. To me, it just seems like more of a fixed version of Urza that includes red as well. So you can do some fun and powerful things, but it's not just inherently broken. So unlike Urza, if you bring this to the table as your commander, you're probably not going to get hated out right away. But time will tell, maybe I'm wrong and this thing is absolutely busted. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.